Now, hello everyone. Welcome to the first installment of our Career Insights series, Careers for Urban Studies Majors. My name is Ji-Hyun Ju. I'm an advisor and program coordinator here at Beyond Barnard. So we'll be hearing from our 5 alums today. Thank you so much to our panelists for making the time to join us today. There will be an audience Q&A toward the end of our program. So for our students in the room, feel free to ask questions in the chat or unmute yourselves when the time comes. I think everyone in the room already knows Professor Aaron Passell from the Urban Studies Department. I know for our panelists, I've gotten many of your contacts through him, but he will be joining us later on in our panel to answer any questions as well. So on that note, we can start off with introductions. A couple questions to our panelists here to get started on intros. What is your current role? How did you get here? And what sparked your initial interest in the work you're doing now? And we can do sort of popcorn style. Anyone can jump in to get started.
I can start. Hi, everyone. I'm Janet Ceron. I was a Barnard graduate of the class of 2016, and I'm now working at a legal services nonprofit, NILAG, also known as the New York Legal Assistance Group. I'm a paralegal here, and I work closely with student loan borrowers who have attended for-profit schools that may have misled them about their job prospects after graduating college. So I advise student loan borrowers about how, if they could get their loans canceled or how they can manage their student loan payments. I got into this work mainly because I was born and raised in Brooklyn, and so I'm from Sunset Park. It's a neighborhood that has experienced a lack of economic equity, and so I am very I think just interested in helping people manage their finances, and got into this work because I happened to connect with a wonderful student loan lawyer here at NILAG who really showed me the ropes of how to work with student loan borrowers.
Awesome. Thanks, Janet, for opening. Hi, everyone. I'm Gabriella Kaspi, she, hers, class of 2021. I was urban studies and sustainability, and now I work in sustainability. I'm an associate project manager here at JLL on the energy and sustainability services team. So long way of saying I'm a sustainability consultant in the built environment. Prior to JLL, I was at a firm called Socotech as a sustainability analyst, also working in sustainability consulting in the built environment. The majority of my work here at JLL is on the portfolio level, so multiple projects for clients. And previously, I was working mostly on just the building level. A lot of sustainable buildings. My area of subject matter specialty is in sustainable materials. And I am also co-chair of the Emerging Professionals Committee of the Urban Green Council here in New York City. How I got interested in this, I love the built environment. I think that's kind of why we're all here. I really do. And I care a lot about making a sustainable future in cities. And this was just sort of work that seemed to do that, sort of building by building and now on a larger scale. So yeah, it's great work.
I'll go next. My name is Emma Brody. I graduated in 2020. I was also urban studies and sustainability, but I do not quite work in sustainability. I would say it's sustainability adjacent. I work for WSP, which is an engineering consulting firm. I am by no stretch of the imagination an engineer. I am a transportation planner. So I work on multimodal mobility projects, and so that's thinking about transportation from a holistic perspective, not just driving somewhere and getting out. What does a user's journey look like from the moment they leave wherever they're leaving from to where they arrive at whoever they're arriving to. And so I don't really like cars that much. I like trains, I like buses, I like bikes, anything that gets people out of the private automobile. And so a lot of the work that I do is planning and planning adjacent tasks that really get people out of cars and thinking more creatively about how they get places. How I got interested in planning is I really had no idea what I wanted to do. And so I was just kind of Googling, like, what do you do with an urban studies degree? This was when I was trying to find some internships, and I kind of stumbled into planning. At first, I did some environmental planning, and then I transitioned over to land use planning. So I was doing a lot of work with housing policy implementation to try to at least somewhat help address the housing crisis in California. And then I transitioned over to transportation planning because I love transportation. So that's how I got here.
I can go next among the young alumni crew. My name is Anna Suguru. I graduated also in 2020 with a degree in urban studies and sociology. And now I am the co-director and co-founder of a project called the Remedy Project, which is an organization that I started while a senior at Barnard that organizes college students to do advocacy work on behalf of folks who are incarcerated. I came to this role because while I think over the course of my urban studies and sociology coursework, the criminal legal system emerged as the most interesting and I think dynamic aspect of the urban environment to me. And I got really involved in prison justice and criminal legal system justice work on campus. And through that, I met my co-director and co-founder, whose name is David, who's a formerly incarcerated jailhouse lawyer who has a lot of experience doing the type of advocacy work that we do now. We started planning it when I was a senior at Barnard, and then the ball just kept rolling. And as of about a month ago, I am a paid full-time staff member of the organization, which is cool. And outside of that, I also actually have a part-time semesterly contract with SIT, which is the Global Study Abroad Program organization for a program called IHP Cities, which is an urban studies study abroad program that I did when I was a junior. And I actually just wrapped that up yesterday. And I'm the program assistant for the launch. There's a launch for the urban studies for the IHP Cities program out of New York City. And that I think is just continuing my academic and sort of nerdy interest in urban studies. It's a really cool 2 weeks where we give students who are about to travel around the world an introduction to New York and thinking critically about cities.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Klein. I graduated in 2015, and I currently work, I'm a senior housing policy analyst at the Community Preservation Corporation, which is actually a CDFI, a Community Development Finance Institution. So CDFI is sort of like CDC's fund, sort of broadly defined community initiatives. My organization specifically funds the construction of affordable multifamily homes. And so I am not a finance expert. I do not work on the finance side of the house, but because it's an organization that has been financing housing in New York City and state for almost 50 years, the organization has a really good idea of what it takes to get housing built and how to keep it affordable. And so a few years ago, they set up a policy team, small but mighty. Actually, it's me and my boss, who's currently on maternity leave, which we love a robust maternity leave, but I am holding down the fort alone, which is a little overwhelming. But all things considered, I really enjoyed this work, primarily advocating at the state and local level for policies that would support the production of more affordable housing and preserve our existing affordable housing stock. I came to housing sort of after my time at Barnard. While I was at Barnard, I was really interested in sort of disaster studies and risk recovery, climate mitigation, those types of things. And that informed sort of my first career path. But when I went into graduate school, I realized that so much of the sort of bigger picture questions I have about the way the world works and the way our society is structured, a lot of them boil down to like basic insecurity in housing and income. And I wanted to drill into housing specifically and community development. So I've been in this position now for about 8 months. And yeah, had a few experiences before that as well in the housing world.
Thank you all so much for those introductions. There's a variety, such a variety in the work that we're seeing across this panel today. I'm curious to hear about how each of you utilize your undergraduate education in urban studies beyond the classroom space.
I'm happy to jump in on that one first this time. So I think my senior thesis was huge for me. I really loved the coursework and had great connections and relationships with professors and with peers, but I feel like my senior thesis was really when I drilled down working closely with Professor Pacell and also really relying on my classmates for feedback as peer readers. And it was sort of my first experience working in communities. My senior thesis looked at the impact of natural disasters on women in American cities. And so I used data that came out of New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina to structure a survey of women in New York City post-Sandy. And so getting out into communities, talking to folks, creating and administering a survey, I think that sort of helped me see the connection between the theory and the people and the places. And from there, I think that sort of drove me into wanting to like better understand that connection of the people who live in these cities, right? Cities aren't just buildings and blocks and roads. It's the interactions and sort of more like the sociology side of things, which I also am really interested in. So I do think like that was my first experience that sort of launched. I think I see that as something that launched my career. And I mentioned it, I still mention it, it's on my resume. People ask me about it all the time. So I think it's like it was an interesting and exciting project that it still comes up in my current role now almost, oh my God, almost 10 years later. So yeah, that's what I would say sort of launched the journey for me.
I agree with Emily about the senior thesis. I saw a few other panelists not as well. I think that was definitely a turning point. And in terms of sort of the more nebulous things that I've taken from my Barnard education, I think Barnard really taught me how to think and how to think critically and creatively. And my portion of the industry in sustainability is relatively new. And there's not really a right or wrong way to do things always. There is sometimes a right or wrong way to do things. But it does require pulling information from very different parts of the industry, pulling them together and creating some sort of product or some sort of end goal. And I think, the liberal arts way of, pulling information from sociology and urban studies, the built environment and architecture and sociology and psychology and whatever other sort of field it is, and pulling them into sort of something cohesive has been an invaluable lesson and sort of toolbox I've been given from Barnard in my professional life. So I think that's probably the biggest one. It's in also just sort of the background on the built environment as well. Hi, Professor Pacell. So aside from that, I think the combination of those two things has really helped me along, especially in the consulting world. Emma, perhaps you could agree with that or refute it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Barnard really kind of teaches us how to think critically, and really kind of unpack the deeper trends and the deeper meaning of what we're looking at. And I think that that's such a critical skill that I certainly use every day. I think kind of similarly from a broader perspective, the urban studies curriculum, at least how I experienced it, focused really a lot on understanding how historical ideas and trends and injustices have really shaped how cities function today. And then, like Gabriella said, thinking critically about those different concepts and topics. And I think that, understanding how we got to where we are today is really critical to planning efforts that prioritize equity. And that's really one of the most major components of the urban planning work that I've been doing. And so I think that I've used that foundational equity knowledge from the urban studies program to really help me understand the main goals of the projects that I work on, so that we can make sure that what we're doing is actually addressing inequity. From a more kind of skills and technical competency based perspective, I think that the urban studies program really taught me how to use GIS and strategic and kind of focused reading. A lot of the reading kind of component I got from senior seminar. Other kind of technical things or basic concepts like zoning or urban design elements, or just generally speaking, planning documents. So a lot of the technical things that we learn in the urban studies program, I use every day here.
I would also second the senior thesis point. I did an ethnographic study about family courts in New York, and I think that perspective on the legal system still shapes very much how I think about my career and how I think about where my career is going. The other thing, I think more broadly, that the urban studies, and especially urban studies and sociology together, taught me that I still use today is thinking about systems. I think a city is thinking about cities is such a illustrative microcosm of the way that power is, the way that power works and the way that power is reproduced, and the way that people organize to challenge that power and to shape society and cities to shape the interests of people rather than people in power. And as someone who I think I've always been interested in social change and social movements, and I think the things that I learned over the course of my urban studies and sociology degree really shaped and focused that passion in a way that I still apply today. And I think also outside of my career, I feel I think about my urban studies degree and the things I learned all the time. I live in Brooklyn still. I live next to a big construction site. It was a big supermarket that was knocked down and now is in the process of being turned into condos. And I am in a group with my neighbors where we're in conversation with the developers about the way that development is going to take place. And I think a lot about zoning and the way that affects me and my neighbors. And I think I use it every day, and thinking about the way that I move through Brooklyn and New York.
I'll quickly echo what Anna just said. I think that I was an urban studies major with a concentration in political science, and it just so happened because I was born and raised in New York and was curious about the political system in New York. If anything, I'd say my degree has really, outside of the classroom, it has really helped me be an informed citizen. I'm from a neighborhood where Sunset Park, that is home to Industry City, which is there are huge warehouses on the waterfront, and it is now an innovation hub, you can say, and it has a lot of stores that are financially inaccessible to a lot of the residents experiencing low income in my neighborhood. So I feel like my major really helped me be an informed citizen, and it helped me support the advocates, my neighbors who are advocating against further development of the waterfront that would further isolate the residents from accessing the space there. And outside of that, another quick thing was just learning how to devise solutions to problems. And I think in my neighborhood, a big problem is the street trees are not being taken care of. So a few neighbors and I started a small group that take care of our street trees. And it's I think you just move through the world and move through cities in a way that you look at problems and you start to identify solutions. And like, if you can't act on it, you work with other people or like push ideas for others to act on it.
That's so beautifully said. Thank you so much. Building on this question that I just posed, if looking back at your career thus far, what other skill sets would you say are important to the current work that you do?
I'll say in my short professional career, I will say that a willingness to learn and really learn things, and sort of be okay with failing professionally, which I think is very different from failing academically. There's more on the line in many ways. I think that's something invaluable. And then, of course, on the technical side, I learned the majority of my technical skills that I use in my job every day on the job. So I think that, finding people, around you or, either on your team that are willing to sort of help you through that, whether it's, learning how to read an architectural drawing, learning the process, learning what construction actually looks like in a time frame and what everything means and this entire other lexicon of things. Those are invaluable tools. And I think there's something to be said about the experiential learning of learning that on the job rather than in a classroom. It's a little more pressing, it's a little more intense, and it kind of just makes you want to succeed more. So I think that and the willingness to learn go hand in hand. I will also say that, interning definitely helps with that because you sort of have your training wheels and you can get started and learn, and by the time you're out, you have some knowledge and experience behind you. So I'll also say that's an invaluable experience as well.
I would just add, and I think this echoes something that folks said earlier, I feel like when I was at Barnard, I learned how to think critically and ask questions and collaborate with peers. And those are the skills that I feel like I use still every day in my job. I'm sure there are tidbits from classes that I still pull on, or I still have like a lot of the books that I read for coursework, and I don't reference them like often, but I like that I have them around, but I think that the sort of process of learning how to be curious is something that I really took away from my Barnard education, and that's something that serves me in my job every day. Because I think what I've seen in my work experience is that when folks have a sense that you are eager to learn and want to try, they are eager to teach. And so that has sort of been the mentality that I've tried to bring to all of my roles and career experiences so far, is because you'll never come into a job knowing everything that you need to know for that job. If you do, you're overqualified for that job, right? So I think to go in understanding that you have skills that are valuable and insights and knowledge that you will get to build on and use, but also I think the greatest strength coming out of a program like this is knowing how to learn and to be curious and to work with others and ask for help when you need it. Because I think those are the qualities that help you really learn a workplace and learn how to do your work there.
I would say kind of similarly to that, and also what Gabriella was saying, I think on maybe my second day at my job, my supervisor at the time had said to me, you don't really learn urban planning in school, you learn it by doing it. And there's not really anything that, that you can do to change that, just because it's really such a learn by doing field. I am not I live in San Diego right now. I moved here after graduation. I have no connection to the West Coast. I've never lived here before. I have no family out here. So for me, it was quite a transition moving to a place that I really knew nothing about. But I think back on it, and knowing what I don't know and knowing how to ask for help and find the answers to my questions is definitely something that I learned to do at Barnard, and it's something that I do all the time here. because I think that in a lot of ways, California is a very insular community. A lot of people are just kind of born and raised here and stay here. And there's a lot of just kind of institutional knowledge, I guess, about California that's expected of a lot of people. And so it's been really helpful to me to know what I don't know and be able to ask for help. I think also just kind of the ability to talk to people from diverse backgrounds and with diverse points of view and priorities is something I learned at Barnard. For my senior thesis, my method of data collection was a survey that I went out in the field to conduct, and I talked with all sorts of different people. And I do that in my current job. Everything that we do, there's a community engagement component, and so that is it kind of happens to varying degrees, but at its most basic, what we're doing is going out into the community and seeking folks with all sorts of different experiences and asking them what they need and what they think of what we're proposing. And that's just a really invaluable skill. And that's something I definitely learned to do at Barnard, and particularly when I was doing my thesis.
I'd say that deadlines are really important for my current job because I work with student loan borrowers who are applying to various programs that have hard deadlines. And so one thing I learned at Barnard and as an urban studies major was, I think by my junior or senior year, I learned to really create a good to-do list that was organized, and like I dedicated a lot of my time to like the portion to the project that was going to be like the largest portion of my grade, because that was just how I could juggle like my course load with volunteer and extracurriculars. And so by the time that senior year came around, there were a lot of, I would say, hard deadlines to complete my senior thesis project with my advisor, who's Professor Meredith Lynn. I don't think she's at Barnard. She's not at Barnard anymore, but wonderful person. But we had a series of deadlines where we had to check in with her on the status of our senior thesis, and like meeting those deadlines was my first wake-up call, where it's like I really have to meet these deadlines if it means that I'm going to get a grade and graduate from the school. And it was an important lesson to learn as I moved on to work. I worked at the Justice Department, and then I worked at Legal Services nonprofit, and at both places, deadlines that the court set for you and deadlines that the Department of Education set for student loan borrowers are like very important to meet. So it just means juggling competing interests and figuring out what comes first and what are you going to devote most of your time to. And when you can't devote most of your time to something, you learn how to delegate and ask for help.
I think the skill set that's been most important for me over the past couple of years is like networking and relationship building, professional relationship building. That I think folks told me that when I was an undergrad, and I didn't really take it seriously. I thought networking was like this buzzword and it just didn't like, it felt a little too like stiff and professional of like a way to navigate going into my career. But I think that so much of my like success and sanity over the past couple of years, especially like in building my own organization and supporting myself financially in lots of different ways, so that I could like spend time working on my project when I didn't have money coming in from the organization. My networking and professional relationship building has been like, has really been the skill that I have developed and relied on so much over the past couple of years. I think I didn't realize how much like the world runs on connections when I was an undergrad, and it really does. It really helps to reach out to folks I think that it feels like there's a high like that like people won't want to speak with you if you reach out to them, and that you're bothering people if you reach out to people and you want to network with them. But like now being on the other side of like just starting to get those types of like emails or like LinkedIn requests, like I love receiving those types of messages, and I've heard similar things from people that I've reached out to, and I think that it can especially if you're unsure about what you want to do, if you're considering lots of different paths. If you're trying to build something, building out your network and your professional connections, and not being afraid of reaching out to folks is key.
I totally agree with that. And I want to add, Anna, that's a really great point. New York is an amazing city to network in, particularly in the built environment. There are so many different parts of the industry. There are always events going on. I promise you, every week there's at least one event, whether it's what you're interested in, maybe it's for transportation, maybe it's for nonprofits, or maybe it's for sustainability. But definitely sort of keep your ears to the ground and hear what's going on. And a shameless plug for anyone who's interested in sustainability in the built environment. The Emerging Professionals of Urban Green Council put on lots of events and love having students and waive fees for students. So there's tons of things to learn and ways to meet people here.
Yeah, there's so many valuable points being brought up here. I love what's being said about remaining curious and finding ways to foster that curiosity. I feel like that's something that gets lost along the way quite frequently. We are at our final two questions. I do want to mention that Professor is in the room. I think, Gabriella, you said hi earlier. Once we have our Q&A for students who are thinking on what they'd like to ask our panelists, please feel free to think of questions that you might want to ask Professor Passell as well. So my next question for our panelists is sort of on the industry that you've chosen. How do the challenges and opportunities created by diversity, equity, and/or inclusion play out in your current role within your chosen industry?
I can go. I think that I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I think that DEI is really one of the main goals of every client that I work with and every project that I work on. Almost all planning efforts that we're seeing now, at least in California, are looking to equitably distribute the benefits. And so, for example, to help address the housing crisis in California, cities and agencies are really trying to find ways to get more housing built, but to ensure that as much of that housing as possible has deed restricted affordable units. And that's just something that's going on over the whole state. With transportation, lower income people of color who have kind of seen perpetual historical inequity tend to be those who are most in need of good public transit and active transportation. And so lots of the transportation work that I do is aimed at increasing access and improving the experience for those folks who are traveling around without cars. So I think, kind of in short, DEI really creates a challenge because there is such a disparity in transportation access, but it also creates an opportunity to make people's lives better, since these are the people we can really prioritize our efforts towards.
And within my organization, one of our 3 meta goals is around reducing and ultimately closing the racial wealth gap in housing. But we've taken sort of an interesting approach looking at it on 2 sides, both the home ownership as a value for wealth building and also creating opportunities for emerging BIPOC developers to enter the real estate field, which is, as you know, I think incredibly lucrative, but has also been historically quite exclusionary in sort of implicit ways. And so some of our work has been around both supporting programs for home ownership and affordable housing opportunities in communities that have typically been historically redlined or have other sort of cycles of disinvestment, but also thinking about the field as a whole and how to create more opportunities for a more diverse cohort of young professionals to enter into the affordable housing development field. And also within our organization, even just in the short time that I've been there, have seen it's interesting to see an organization sort of grapple with how to put their money where their mouth is, and having an organization that really is focused on this work externally, then turn internally and say, well, how do we increase our workforce? How do we bring in more folks to work for us that aren't sort of what you typically think of who works in housing finance, again, which has been typically like quite male, quite white, quite old in a lot of ways. And so I think that's an exciting development that we're seeing as like bigger organizations are starting to grapple with not just doing the work out in the world, but doing the work internally in their companies, which I think is an ongoing process and needs to be like a permanent commitment, not just a trendy commitment. But I think that there is momentum there, which is exciting to see.
My current job, I work with student loan borrowers, but I also work with workers experiencing low income that are often working in the informal sector or like being paid in cash, and there's like no documentation that they are in fact employees of a certain company. One thing that has continuously been a challenge is like how to prove that these employees are in fact employees, and how to get these employees their back pay or overtime pay that they're owed from employers. It's a challenge that I think has been, thankfully, we have been able to like work through with some of these clients, because the people who work in the Employment Law Project at NILAG, I don't work in that project, but I collaborate with them often, were people, I think, with lived experiences in those settings and understand that the complications of like what it means to be a documented worker and not. So the way that we often address these issues is just really being advocates before filing cases against the employers, seeing if we can negotiate payment on the client's behalf without having to involve the court system, which will often complicate the client's documented status, or delay their ability to get paid. It's an issue that I really honestly first like came to really understand and grapple with when I was at Barnard. I wrote my senior thesis about the informal sector and domestic workers in New York City and how they have to negotiate for themselves because they're not people that are like documented, or there's no documentation that they are in fact employees of an informal sector. So it's an issue that I come back to time and time and again, like how to best serve clients who are often not recognized as employees and people of the city or state or country.
I'll say that DEI really comes, similar to Emma, comes into practically every request that we get in from a client at this point. In sustainability, it's social equity has moved more into the forefront of the discussion in terms of what private clients are wanting, and to, I guess, both on the sustainable building side and how they integrate social sustainability into the buildings, whether that's the design or where it is or the way that it functions and for whom it functions. And then also on the sustainability strategy side. So, just to give a little background, there's the building itself, and then there's overall strategy. Like client will say, we want to be carbon neutral by 2050, for example, would be like more of a strategy type thing, rather than saying we want this building or this portfolio of buildings to hit these marks. So social sustainability in terms of the strategy side has become more and more a part of the discussion that we have with our clients. And that what that looks like definitely varies. I will say I've worked on a lot of New York City's public schools, and social sustainability has come into play there as well. So it's not just in the private industry, but it's certainly growing. I actually have a colleague of mine here at JLL who started a program called SEAM. What that stands for, I couldn't tell you right off the bat, but it is a social sustainability metric system, or a system of metrics that allows a real estate portfolio to be graded on how socially sustainable it is. And it's based on all of this research that she and a team of experts across the industry have put together. So certainly becoming a larger part of what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Since I'm not or haven't really been in a company or an industry so far, I think I've thought a lot about these questions, challenges, and opportunities in terms of like my personal positionality and privilege. And I think over the past couple of years, I've done a lot of critical reflection about the way in which who I am and my positionality and my privilege should shape the career decisions that I make. Both like how my positionality affects the kind of questions I ask and the types of solutions that I consider or take seriously, and how it should affect like the types of roles that I want to pursue, how much space to take up in certain spaces versus not, and where similarly, like where I can leverage my privilege to be the most useful. And I think I have fought with David quite a bit, my co-director, about whether we should share the role of director. I think in my book, I would want him to be the director. And I think on our day-to-day and our day-to-day flow, I am doing a lot of like the back end work in order to support his vision. He is like the work that we do is really driven by his knowledge and his experience as a formerly incarcerated man. And I like really defer to him in all of our like vision and mission oriented decisions. And I just do a lot of like use the things that I have and know to do like the administrative and organizational back end work. And yeah, I think very critically about the like being a white woman with economic privilege and how much space to take up in social movement and social justice spaces. And I think it's like an ongoing question, personal question. And I think something that is really useful to consider, especially if you're making career decisions in like kind of the social change space, about the power you have, and the ways that, the ways that you think about the world and how those things are shaped by who you are and where you come from.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I'd love to bring Professor Passel into this final question as well. What advice would you give to urban studies majors who are unsure of what kinds of jobs to pursue? And a note before we go into responses here, for our students in the room, please feel free to start dropping those questions into the chat as well.
I so don't want to go first on this. I would really like to hear from somebody who works outside of the academy in urban studies before I have anything to say about this.
Try a bunch of stuff is kind of what I said to myself. I think there's definitely a pressure, particularly at Barnard and the greater Columbia community, to like leave college and like get into your industry. And I maybe I shouldn't be talking because I did that, but I also tried a bunch of stuff and I worked a bunch of jobs and I just kind of moved around. And like Anna said at the beginning, meet people, listen to what they do. I met so many people. I was like, wow, that's a thing. You can sustainability consult in the built environment and get paid for it. That's awesome. But I didn't know that. And so, yeah, try a bunch of stuff, meet a bunch of people. That's my advice.
I like completely second that. My advice would be like, don't rush. I think I felt a lot of, I think I realized after graduating that like my whole life, my pedal had been to the metal, as like, I think everyone who's at like Columbia and Barnard, like you're a high achieving kid at a high achieving school. And I think learning that like life is long and your career is long, and you don't have to rush into a particular career track. You don't have to rush into graduate school. You can try things. You can have like 10 years of doing something and then do something else. I think try your best to take the pressure off yourself and have as good of a time as you can figuring out what you care about, what you want to do, how you can best apply like your skills and your passion to the world of work.
I think similar to that, it's important to remember, or it's been really helpful for me to remember, that there are like a million paths to the same endpoint, right? And those can change and evolve and sort of reshuffle as you make each step that you make in your career, and that none of that is bad. I think that like I remember feeling very nervous about like, how will I like tell the story of like how these pieces fit together? And ultimately, I think, first of all, like it's usually easier to knit your experiences together than you think it is, because folks are excited to just hear what you've been excited about. And I also think that at the end of the day, each experience you have, like the things you take from it will serve you in the next role, even if it's a different topic matter, even if it's a career change, if it's a sector shift, right? Like I think that type of diversity of experience is seen as an asset, not as like a question mark, which I think it maybe used to be sort of more suspicious, and now I really do think it is seen as a strength. So don't fixate on like how do you work backwards from your end goal. But I also have found that like when I've met folks who I'm like, wow, that is a cool, amazing like woman CEO, and I want to be her. I go look her up on LinkedIn and I go back like 15 or 20 years and see where she was when she was at my stage, and sort of use that as a way to often sort of like confirm for yourself, you know, okay, I'm not on the wrong track, or like, okay, I could do something like this too. And it can help you get ideas about where to look or what to think about for your next move. So both like look to the future when it feels exciting, but don't get freaked out because there are a lot of different paths to get there.
Kind of similarly, I would say, you know, it's totally okay to have absolutely no idea what you want to do. I like still don't entirely know what I want to do. So, you know, don't think that just because we're up here, we have it all figured out. Like, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I know I certainly don't. So, you know, while it's totally okay to not know what you want to do, I would say it's more, what's more important is to know what your values are. So think about what sorts of things are important to you, what sort of impact do you want to have, and think about the types of things, not necessarily like the one thing, but think about the types of general things that might help you somehow get there. And I would say think about what you want to do more from a mission perspective rather than what like specific thing in the world do you want to do. It's okay to do a lot of things. It's okay to just do one thing. It's okay, you know, to find your own way there, to get there. Like whatever you do is the way that it's, you know, supposed to be done. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. Just like, you know, think about what you want your impact to be.
Totally. That reminds me, when I was in school, I was like, I know I want to work in the public service. And there was a career fair being hosted at Columbia that was mainly geared for people who were interested in doing, I think, finance work. But there were like 3 or 4 employers from the government sector or like public interest sector. And I almost didn't go to the career fair, but I'm very glad I did, because I wound up connecting with someone who ended up being one of my supervisors at my first job after graduating from college. And it's like, I don't think I would have learned about that job opportunity had I not gone to the fair, to be quite honest. So I think being comfortable going to some of these career fairs and talking to people and connecting and trying things and seeing how it goes, because I think no path is really linear when you you know, do urban studies. You can really touch a lot of aspects of urban studies.
I want to just throw in 2 things really quickly. First, I have a very distinct memory of 5 years ago going out with a group of seniors after they just turned in their theses. And one of them said to me, "It seems like everybody else already has a job. What am I going to do? I don't have one yet." Right. And we had a conversation, the student, I think, managed to relax eventually, and now is found an interesting post-graduation job, went and got a master's in urban planning at an excellent program, and is, I believe, on her way out and on to the next big thing. So, I gather, and just the former students here can also reflect on this, but I gather that there's a lot of sense of pressure to have something as you finish up, and you should know that not everybody will, and many of the people who don't will go on to figure out great things. And then I just want to reflect very briefly on my own experience, and this is partly in response to Emma's point about values. I graduated college with a set of values that ultimately led me to where I am, but initially got me nowhere, and I needed a job. So I made sandwiches and learned what it meant to live on $7.25 an hour, which was super important for my formation as a sociologist ultimately. But, so some of us will figure out, important things to do immediately, and some of us will figure out how to, feed, clothes, and house ourselves. And all of those, to the various other points people have made, all of those are part of a set of steps towards a trajectory, as far as I can tell.
Fantastic. I'm seeing a student question here, Daniela, a really important question that I think is applicable to all industries. How should you leverage your skills in an interview or cover letter when you don't necessarily check off all the qualifications on the job application? And any of our panelists or Professor Passel can jump in.
I wouldn't highlight the fact that that's a skill or a job set that you don't have. I would highlight what you do have and what you can offer. It's something that I see time and time again when we're interviewing interns here at NILAG. We're interested in the people that can tell us what they can do and what they're willing to do, not really interested in hearing what people don't know.
And I think to go off of that, similarly, like reflecting a learner's mindset, if there are things you don't do in an interview, like expressing that that's maybe not your area of expertise, but you're really interested in learning and excited to dive in. I think it's very rare that an applicant, I think, that an applicant checks off every single box on a job posting. And if you do, I think you are overqualified. But I think that to lead with the things you have expertise on and show excitement to develop expertise in areas that you may not have it yet. I think that's like that to me, I see that as a strength, not as a detriment to the candidate.
I would also add, just from an administrative perspective, you don't always know what happens to make those job postings or who's involved in making the job postings. It's not always the people whose team that job is for who write those postings. Sometimes it's just like some person in HR. And so just because you see this like giant list of all these qualifications, don't think that they all need to be met, and don't think that, they're all like really supposed to be there. Because you really don't know like who made the posting. So take it with a grain of salt.
Can I piggyback on Haley's question? Haley just posted a great question about a degree that I was going to post in a very slightly different very slightly different way. If you have pursued a graduate degree, which I know at least one of you has, and if you have the sense that in your field pursuing a graduate degree might be useful for you somewhere down the line, how did you or will you make the decision about when and which degree? And then you should also see Haley's question may have slightly different emphasis.
I'd actually love to move into Haley's question here for our panelists. Did any of you have an interest in earning a graduate degree after Barnard, or do you think it might be helpful to pursue one eventually?
I thought I was going to go into graduate school after I thought I was, that was sort of what I was aiming to do. And I ultimately decided to put it off, which I think was actually a very good decision. I am very happy with the work that I do, and I like the work that I do. And I think I was going into graduate school for the wrong reasons. I don't remember if it was Erin Passell who told me this, but or someone else in the department who was basically like, you go to college or you get your undergrad degree and you kind of figure it all out, right? Or figure out some of it. You don't go to graduate school to figure it out. You go to graduate school to meet an end, right? And I was going to graduate school to figure it out, which is fine, and people do that. I just don't think it was the right path for me. It's funny, last week I was actually talking with my dad about this, and I decided that I would like to get a graduate degree eventually, but because of my own education, I want to further my own education. I don't see any need for it right now professionally, but that's my own experience.
So I did get a graduate degree. I went to planning school and graduated in 2020 on Zoom. It was fun. Professor Passell wrote me a recommendation letter. I talked to him, I think, a few times before when I was considering applying. For me, I was sort of in a position at an organization where I knew I was learning a lot, but everyone who was a step above me, for the most part, had a graduate degree. And I felt like I was seeing a lot of job postings where I was too qualified for entry level, but not qualified enough for the step above. And also, I wanted to go back to school. I loved being at Barnard. I loved learning. I was like diving into this field where I felt like I was learning so much and I wanted to learn more. So it was both like a professional decision and a personal like interest in learning decision. I had a great experience in graduate school. I got my master's in planning. I'd be happy to talk to anyone on the panel or in the audience who's considering that. I think it can be a really great opportunity to build your skill set, build your network, learn more about your field. But I think, like Gabriella said, it's not required. I worked for a while before I went to grad school, which I think was actually really good for me. I think there are plenty of people who have incredible careers without a graduate degree, and there are plenty of people who have incredible careers with one. So I think it's sort of more of a personal decision based in interest and curiosity, I would argue, than like a necessity for the field at this point.
Anna, I saw you briefly unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was going to say something pretty similar to Gabriella, that I have been toying with the idea of going to law school since I graduated, and I took the LSAT in the year I graduated, and came close to applying, but for similar reasons to Gabriella, decided against it, and I'm thankful that I made that decision. I think especially for law school, well, I don't know that much about other graduate programs, but I also think this is similar for other graduate degrees. I guess it's also expensive to take on a graduate degree, especially a law degree. And so I think the advice that I have gotten a lot and have followed is that you shouldn't do it, like take on a graduate degree unless you know exactly what you want to use it for, especially for law, because it's such a like practical degree where it's giving you a license to perform, to use the law. I thought about going to law school just because I was like, this is probably the next right step for me, but not really sure like what kind of law career I'd want to pursue. And I still might go to law school down the line, but I think I'm going to wait until I have a very clear idea of what I want my like a legal career for me to look like.
As we reach the end of our hour here, I do want to take a moment to thank everyone here today, our panelists, Professor Passell for joining us today and providing us with such thoughtful insight. For our panelists, you will be hearing from me. I'll put everyone in an email so you have each other's contact information. And a reminder to our students that you will be getting a recording of this event. We hope to see you at our next Career Insights, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.